Our panel today is going to be CWRU Women in STEM. We have four awesome panelists. The first one is Chioma. Chioma is a technical product manager for Cardinal Commerce, a Visa company. And Chioma is also an entrepreneur and a fashion influencer. And her designs have been featured on TV, Forbes 30 Under 30, and runways like New York Fashion Week. And last night, she received the Case Alumni Association Young Alumni Award and is the first Black woman to receive this award. Our second panelist is Diana Zavella. And Diana is an operations manager at Level, a healthcare technology startup based in New York. She works remotely and is a digital nomad. And she graduated from CWRU in 2021 with a degree in systems engineering and environmental studies. In her time here at CWRU, she was involved in various environmental initiatives as well as being an active of Phi Sigma Rho. Chioma was also a member of Phi Sigma Rho when she was here. And our third panelist is Ashley Myers. Ashley is a senior engineering program manager at Medtronic within their cardiac ablation solutions group based out of Cleveland, Ohio. And she graduated from CWRU in 2010 with a degree in biomedical engineering and received her MBA from Cleveland State University. Prior to Medtronic, Ashley worked for Philips Healthcare as a CT manufacturing engineer, mechanical design engineer, and program manager. When the Philips Cleveland site was closed, Ashley moved over to the aerospace defense industry, working for Safran, where she managed sustaining engineering U.S. military programs and the industrialization team. And Ashley met her husband, Dan, at Case, and they had two children, William and Abby. And our last panelist is Catherine Hofmeister. Catherine is a principal member of the technical staff at Systems Engineer at Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, my brain just for a moment. Catherine is a certified project manager, inventor, and finalist for the 2023 R&D 100 Awards. For her role in co-developing an advanced thermo-optical imaging technique. She graduated from Case with an aerospace engineering degree in 2008 and earned her master and PhD in mechanical engineering from Ohio State. During her time at Case, she was a dedicated member and the vice president of recruitment for Phi Sigma Rho sorority. So thank you so much, our four panelists, for being here today. It's an immense pleasure to have you. And let's start with our panel discussion. And the first question I would like to ask our panelists is, how did your time at Case prepare you for your career? Is there anything useful that you didn't expect to need? And I think if it's possible, can we start with Diana, since you graduated most recently?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I took from my Case education is learning how to learn. As a Case student, there's always more to do, always more to learn, always more to get involved with. And that ability to manage my time and figure out, like, these are the things that I want to dedicate myself to, as well as, like, in a heavy course load, how can I manage all of these classes, like, on top of my involvement in school, and, being able to handle complex problems that are thrown at you in class and synthesize information. That's the biggest thing that I use on a day-to-day basis. Working for a startup, I have a lot of different hats, and Case really prepared me to have all of those different hats and be able to learn totally new skills that I didn't expect to be able to. So I think that that's the biggest thing I took from Case.
Chioma?
Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. So God, what did I? So what CASE taught me was resilience. So sometimes you can plan, you can study hard, but you still fall short of your goals. And what CASE taught me is that is okay. You won't always reach all of your goals, but that doesn't mean you're a failure, and you will have a lot of mistakes and missteps before you get to your success. So that's a lot that I learned at CASE, because these exams be hard. And I'd be studying all night, and I still got an F, but it's okay. But that resilience really helped me in my career, because in the real world, that's how life is. You know, you're not always going to have success after success after success. And in my career, I've made a lot of mistakes, but those mistakes have actually helped me out a lot to be where I'm at today. And something that I learned from CASE that I didn't expect that helped me, this is gonna be a corny answer, but connecting with people. Like, we're humans, we need that human connection. So being at CASE, talking with all of these different people and working through a lot of like difficult classes and knowing how to speak with people has really helped me in my management position at Cardinal, since I talk to a lot of people and I don't just manage them, but like I have to understand their reasonings for doing things and how best that they work.
So those were definitely the first two items on my list. Learning how to learn and how to teach yourself was something that I definitely took away from my time here at CASE, along with the resilience, because, you know, coming in as, you know, a straight A student and then getting some of those exams back with not grades that I was used to receiving in high school was a bit difficult at first, but it was, you know, a good learning experience and something that, you know, you have to get past and move on from there. I guess adding to that, I would be learning how to lead. So at Case Western, I had the opportunity to be in a lot of different organizations and even helped coordinate a healthcare symposium here at Case Western during my time. And so getting the funding for that, getting the speakers, and being able to, you know, have that opportunity as an undergraduate student was really important and actually helped me start to realize that I liked project and program management. As far as, let's see, what is one of the things that I didn't expect or that to learn here, and was really that I am a outgoing person and more of a social person. I didn't really have that as part of my identity before coming to CASE, or didn't think that, but that really, my time here helped me kind of branch out and realize that I am a bit more outgoing and I like being with people and organizing people, which was a good takeaway from a self-learning perspective.
Oh man, I'm last. Okay. I'll go with a very different answer then, because you guys covered a lot of really good ones. Glass blowing. So one of the cool things about CASE is that you can take classes at the Cleveland Museum of Art and Cleveland Museum of Music. And one of the classes I took was glass blowing, which weirdly enough came in handy later when I decided I was going to make lasers for a living. So that's one of the things that you never know what kind of weird things you do will come in handy. Like, I took the politics of Russia at CASE, which, as you can imagine now, working at a defense lab is probably pretty useful. But yeah, it's one of those, a lot of these skills, even if I don't directly use them, has helped me relate to all the different types of people I need to work with, especially at one of the labs. Being in the position I am, the technologists and other people that I have to work with to get the things we design built. CASE really taught me a lot of those skills that I was surprised to learn most universities now do not. So like, as a aerospace engineer here, we had to do machine shop and actually learn how to build things and those sorts of things, which really come in handy when you're trying to design something and talk to the people who are going to make it. It makes you very valuable later on, so I highly recommend it.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Well, I never knew that there's like glass blowing at CASE, and think like we just heard about a lot of like skills that you didn't expect to need or to learn here, and I think this is a good segue into our next question. And our next question is, what is one thing or things that you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting your career? And I think we'd like to start with Catherine.
Oh gosh, okay. that your career is not going to be what you think it will, period. I know what I thought I would be doing is definitely has nothing to do with what I thought I was going to do today or when I was in college. And it has worked out that I can do a lot of really cool things. Like I'm one of the architects of how our digital engineering design tools are being built at one of the national labs, so that's fun. But I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not any of those things. So I think, early on, I thought, I have to do this one thing. And this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be what I make my career on. And in the end, even if you fail at that, you'll probably end up doing something really cool. Like, don't put too much pressure on yourself.
So for me, I would say it's the importance of asking questions and also the importance of resiliency. So on the questions side, not being afraid to ask them and just seek to understand why things are done in a certain manner. So in the corporate world, you get a lot of, oh, we've always done it that way, or it's always that way. We've always done it this way. And I've started to probe a bit on that and say, okay, well, tell me more, help me understand. And in the course of doing that, I've been able to tease out opportunities for efficiency, opportunities for us to make changes, and then challenge assumptions. Because a lot of times there's things, even especially in the medical device industry where it's heavily regulated, it's, oh, well, this is required from the regulation. Okay, show me where. Where does it say that? Oh, it doesn't. So, helping to challenge some of that status quo and how you normally work, or how the company normally worked. From the resiliency side, echoing your comments from before, life will throw you curveballs, right? It's not always going to be easy, and your ability to bounce back from those sets you apart from others in the workforce. And, being able to deal with those personal challenges, the health issues, the emotional roller coaster that you'll encounter as you progress in your career and in your life is important to be able to continue on and also try to keep a cheery disposition throughout those challenges.
Okay, I would say for me, it was being okay to make mistakes and not think that's the end of it. I know for women, we are not given as many chances as the men. And then if you're a marginalized woman, you're given even less chances. So I do understand that how the world works, one person's mistake is not the same. But because of that fear, I think I didn't kind of do a lot of things because I was afraid of that fear. And I'm like, man, if it was a white man, it's okay. But if it's me, I'm out. So understanding that you can make mistakes and that you will be okay. And then a lot of people like you have made those mistakes. It's just that you may not know about it because no one is telling you. But you know your mistakes because you're the ones making them. So that's something I wished I learned early on was like, everyone makes mistakes and you will be okay. I promise you.
Well, I'm at the start of my career. I graduated a little less than 2 years ago, but I think something that I'm, really working on learning at work is how to communicate with different people who have different skill sets. So on my team, I have to work with programmers. I have to work with sales representatives. I have to, be able to communicate what I do with my bosses. And the work I do is, I'm doing what I'm doing, but you have to be able to make it explainable to all of these different groups who want to know different things, right? A salesperson, well, how is that going to affect my customers? An engineer, coder, how does that impact like the code I need to build? Your boss, like here are the results that I'm showing. And I'm really working on being able to make my work understandable to people who have those different skill sets. So I think that, that's a big thing that, I'm trying to be better at. And at Case, I had a lot of classes with engineers, and so I know I communicate in a certain way. Well, that doesn't work for everyone. How can I make my style of communication and adjust it to be able to like more broadly communicate what I'm working on?
Thank you. Sorry, losing my voice a little bit. Thank you for your answer. Those are really, really great advices, and I believe that for people, like for students who are here, now that we've heard about, I don't know, but all the skills that you didn't know when you were starting out your career, I'm sure that that has helped remove a few barriers in our future. So really, thank you for that. So as Chioma said, there is a lot of pressure and limitations put on women at work, and I think that's a really good segue into our third question. So as a woman, so many studies have shown that women can undervalue themselves in the workplace. And so as a woman in STEM, how do you ensure that you are valued in your workplace, and what advice would you give to current students about negotiation and receiving credits for their work?
You can go first, actually. Sure. Okay, so this is a tough one. I am actually still learning how to do this because it is very hard for me to take credit because I'm just like, oh, I didn't do much. But that's what we as women learn. You don't do much, you do very small, even if that's not the case. So some things that I've been trying is to take credit for my work, I just focus on just what I did. So instead of saying, oh, I didn't do much, I'm like, I did A, B, and C. Right? Because you're being factual. And I feel like since I was approaching it like that, it made me feel, I don't know the word, but it was just easier for me to, speak up and take credit for my work. Because I'm like, I did A, B, and C. This is the facts. As for how do you ensure that you're valued in your workplace? And then for negotiation, I am not sure. I'm still learning that. So maybe the panelists will have better answers. But as for how you're feeling, how you are valued in your workplace, I would say, I'm just going to be honest. If the world doesn't value women, it's not going to, there's nothing we can do. But what you can do at your organization, if you feel like you're not being valued, if you have people managers or HR, or if you are really close with your manager, talk with them. I actually had to do that once where I was being bullied at my job. And so I talked to my manager, and she quickly removed the person who was bullying me and undervaluing my work, even though I've contributed so much to the organization. And as soon as she was removed, everything got better. So I would say, if you're not feeling valued in the workplace, reach out to your manager. If you feel comfortable, reach out to HR. That's what I've done.
And
So don't be afraid to do your research. So looking on Glassdoor, salary.com, talking to people that have those positions that are open to sharing with you what the starting salary is. When I did my second co-op, I actually negotiated for that salary, for my hourly rate. And my boss at the time, told me, oh, you shouldn't do that. It leaves a bad taste in your manager's mouth. So when I got my first job out of college, I didn't negotiate because I had heard, oh, you shouldn't. That's not, you're gonna, that's frowned upon. Well, come to find out when I was helping on interview panels, and just over the course of casual conversations with the HR manager, found out that the starting salary that they were offering individuals for that job was multiple thousands more than what I was given starting out. So I went and just kind of had a casual conversation with my manager and said, oh, hey, by the way, found out that for my job, we're actually hiring folks at, X amount higher than what I was brought in at. And he's like, oh. And so he met with HR, and they ended up adjusting me and getting me brought back up. So after that experience, I was very cognizant about, salary, pay bands, and making sure that I was aware of what the pay was for certain positions that I was going for. Since then, I've been able to grow my career much more and well past that starting salary. But just don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Ask those questions, do the research, and make sure you're informed about what jobs you're going after.
yeah, my last semester, I took a professional development workshop at CASE, which was run jointly with the Department of Computer Science. I don't know if people know Professor Evren, but she was the faculty sponsor at the time. And it was run jointly by her and by a PhD student in the School of Business. And we had a negotiation workshop. And afterwards, I sat down with the PhD student who was running it. And I had like a really honest conversation with her. I was like, I'm not motivated by money. Like, I want to do meaningful work. And if I feel like what they offer me is fair, like, I don't really feel a need to negotiate. And she sat me down and she was like, no, you have to ask for more. Even if you're happy with what they're giving you, you negotiating makes it so that more women will negotiate in the future. And I had never thought about it that way. And that was really impactful advice for me, because I got an offer. I was happy with the offer, but I was like, I have to negotiate. And I had that conversation in the back of my head, because that PhD student had told me 20% of men negotiate their first job. Only 4% of women do. And so by negotiating that starting salary, like, you're doing your little part to, shatter the glass ceiling. And like, that conversation really has stuck with me. And I don't think I've ever like talked about that conversation publicly before. But it's like, it's been 2 years, and like, I still think about that. And I want to pass that on to everyone, that like, even if it feels like you're negotiating is hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's awkward. Talking about money is really awkward, especially at work. But, you want to be valued and you want to be paid fairly. And, yeah, it's okay to overcome the awkwardness.
The mental framing of that negotiation too helps. So as like a female, just almost framing it for yourself of, okay, I want to get more for my family. I want to get more for myself. I want to get more for the people that I'm taking care of. For me, at least, that perspective helped me with negotiation.
So one thing I would say is most things are negotiable. Sometimes you'll come up with something that isn't, but I found even like graduate school stipends are negotiable, which I didn't think they would be, but FYI, they are. But so I actually have a couple of answers for that. The first one, how do you make sure you're valued? And I would say find the people who are going to value you and work with them. One of my favorite people to work with is a modeler who, now that I am in a project management role, likes to casually throw out, back in the day when we did technical work together in such and such department, whenever someone starts questioning my technical knowledge in meetings, just because the particular department I used to work in, so the national labs are very casual. No one ever uses like doctor this, or no titles are ever used. And where I am now, you're not necessarily a PhD. Where I used to be, you almost always were. So by him casually referencing when I used to work in that department, he's basically telling everyone that is on the call or in the meeting, she has a PhD, listen to her. But it's something that I found very useful over time. And between that and just, if someone says something and it doesn't get heard, just respond, yes, like such and such said, that's a great idea. And that will help the women around you as well. And if you're having issues getting listened to in meetings, talking to your manager or your principal investigator or whoever it is that's in the meeting with you, getting them to say that after you say things goes a long way to your ideas being given credit for your own ideas. And then what was getting credit for your work. Definitely negotiate. They are all correct. But what I would say is get as much information as you can before that negotiation. If you have an official job description, even if it's like a corporate job description that isn't specific to you, find it and go through line by line with how you did that job, and do it for the job you currently have, the promotion that you want, and show how you're already doing that job. It's something that most people don't necessarily do. They just are like, well, I really should have been promoted. If you have, I even made a spreadsheet of all the different points of what someone in that position would do and how I'm already doing it. It makes the way to getting that a lot less subjective. And so, you can take your manager from being like, oh, another couple years, you need to be older or something to, oh, okay, and actually helping you get it sooner. And so I would highly recommend doing that and talking to people that have already been through it and what worked for them.
Yeah, I heard recently, and this is a paraphrase, so I heard recently, a good manager, helps you and supports you in the job that you're in. A great manager hopes that you'll move on and hopes that, you'll manage them one day and that you'll get more responsibilities. And I think, seeking out those people who are going to advocate for you in a meeting and be like, no, like that's what she had said already, or oh yeah, when we worked together and was on this project, and seeking out those people who, will stand up for you and will advocate for you is really important.
So building off of that, who you work for, in many cases, is more important than the job itself. Because having that advocate, having someone that will help mentor you, help coach you, and will advocate for you is extremely important. And it's, starting out, it's hard to tease that out, but over time, you'll know what to look for, what questions to ask, and also what type of personality in a manager works best with you and your way of working.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I personally looked for was when I was interviewing for full-time roles, how many women interviewed me. And that's something that I really noticed. It's like, wow, half my interview panel was women. Like that's awesome. That made me feel, supported as a candidate in the pipeline, and, made me feel confident working there. And
But I'll say that definitely depends on industry, for sure. So when I switched from the medical industry into aerospace, it was starkly different when it came to the demographics within the workplace. So in my first year there, they had me go and serve as at the Ohio Aerospace Day and man the booth, because I was one of the only female engineers that they had at the company, and the individual that was running the event came up to me and he said, "Oh, well, Ashley, what did you think of the panel? What did you think of the event?" And so I joked with him. I was like, "Oh, it was great, but you could use a little bit more diversity in your panel next year." And he joked. He's like, "Oh, well, do you want to speak next year?" And I said, "Well, we'll talk." But it was kind of funny, right? Because it depends on where you're working, what the environment is like, and also what the industry is.
Thank you so much. And it's like, I love all the discussion that is around this question. I have like one little follow-up to Dr. Hofmeister.
Yeah.
There are students here who are looking to go into grad school, so I would like to ask what that particular question, especially in like how to get credit for your work, apply in academia.
So, be open to what you want to do in grad school is one of the things I would say. I know I applied to graduate school thinking I wanted to do something very specific. And when I went to interview at graduate schools, some of the best ones and ones that I went to Ohio State. What they did is they introduced me to other professors, people that I wasn't necessarily going in thinking I would want to work with or work for, who would value the different parts of my resume. And that's what Ohio State did very well that made me go there, is you don't necessarily know what parts of your resume are going to be most important to certain labs. Like I said, one of them really wanted me because I did glass blowing, which was a fascinating, like, really, that's what you got out of my resume? But a lot of the things like you do in your extracurricular activities they translate really well into a lab setting, especially if you're in Phi Sigma Rho, you know how to negotiate with people. You've had to negotiate, especially if you live in the house. You've had to do that. You know how to lead people and get parties together or get events together. Those same skills that I use to do that and to motivate people, they went to when I was working in the thermal test complex and had to get, multi-million-dollar test items, get setups for them to actually burn and things. Those same exact skills translate. And that's something that, when you're interviewing, own that. And what I will say is, if people don't believe that your time in a sorority is going to translate into useful work, they are probably not the people you want to work for. And that's something that, if you have that gut feeling when you're going into graduate school, it will save you a lot of time and a lot of stress listening to it in the beginning. Because I was lucky, and I ended up choosing graduate school because of what they offered me, and they set me up with people that would value my work and things. Some people did not, and I will say that's something that you definitely want to look for is, value those skills that you have. Sit down and put them into writing as though you are going to be planning a test, as you're going to be designing a project and getting people together to, negotiate lab space and negotiate who's doing what work, what hours you can be in the lab, those sorts of things. And they're very valuable, so don't sell yourself short.
Thank you for your answer. And a lot of your answer for question 3 involves like working around people who advocate for you and and value your work. And Diana also talked about like she said, a great manager is someone who hopes that like you will like really improve and someday will manage them. And that to me sounds like a mentor. So I think this is a really good like segue to our 4th question, which is how do you find mentorship and advocates in the workplace? And what is the role of mentorship and how has mentorship helped you through your career?
So for me, mentorship has been helpful to be, a third party, independent third party to bounce ideas off of, and also to be someone that can help hold a mirror up for me and help me understand myself a bit better. I actually, my first mentor was Dr. Claire Rimnack when I was in high school. She's one of the mechanical engineering professors here. And one of the comments that she made to me still resonates today. She said, well, Ashley, you don't have to do it just because it's hard. But I'm like, but I like hard things. I like challenges. I like proving people wrong. I like solving those tough problems and unraveling those problems that other people can't. So it was just interesting having that conversation. And then my time at, in the aerospace defense industry, they did have, a formal mentoring program there. And I got matched up with the general manager of one of our other sites. And it was great having him as an advocate. And he was very, very supportive of women in engineering, women in aerospace. And he even said, he acknowledged that this wasn't an industry that was very welcoming always to women, and if I ever encountered issues with that, to come to him and let him know. But then he also was very helpful with, navigating some of the challenges that I was seeing, in the site that I was working with, and just how best to tackle some of those problems. So having that mentor was beneficial. So it's been through formal mentoring a lot of the time, and then even just having the conversation with individuals at my current company of, are you open to a mentoring type relationship with someone that is in a position that I would like to be in the future? And he said, and yeah, and so and we've had we've had conversations about mentoring, and then it's just been up on me to schedule that time with him. So mentoring has been very helpful to springboard my career sooner, quicker.
I was gonna say, my My experience would be, don't expect a single mentor to do everything. Both because they probably don't have the time to be everything you need out of a mentor in one person, but also it's easier to find a mentor for a specific thing than it is like the person you want to be. So don't feel strange about asking multiple people to mentor you in smaller things. Like if you really appreciate how someone gives presentations or how they lead others or something like that, you can ask them to mentor you in those things and be specific when you ask like what you want them to mentor you in or why you chose them. Because I know sometimes if you just ask someone, will you mentor me? And it's this vague thing that seems really big. But if you ask them for something specific that gives you both an out if it's not working, number one, and number two, it helps get a yes because it's going to help give it some structure so they're not just agreeing to some vague, what am I going to do?
I think also like, you know, in addition to having more like formal mentors, like don't be afraid to, you know, seek advice in casual conversations too. Like that conversation about negotiation that really stuck with me. Like, I don't know if that grad student even remembers having that conversation with me, but, take advice from a variety of different people and, learn from everyone's experiences too. I don't know, I work for a small company, so we didn't have any like formal mentorship programs or anything. So I've just, oh, I like same, like I like the way that this person presents. I like the way that this person is a leader. Like, let's talk about it. Like, how can I, improve my skill in an area that someone else is better than me or more senior? And I definitely really agree with like, look for different skills in different people rather than like necessarily like one perfect person to be your mentor.
And you don't even have to call it mentoring, right? So I've set up calls with folks and just like, I want to benchmark off of you. Like I've heard you're a really good software program manager, and and I'm in this new role. I'm not a software background. How can I learn from you? What are the best practices? What have you learned over the time? And just casual conversations with that have been very helpful. And people want to talk about themselves and want to talk about what they've done. So it's been very helpful to just have those types of conversations with people, not under the umbrella of a formal mentorship, but just as a, hey, I want to learn from you, and can I benchmark off of you? I've heard you've done great work in this area.
Okay, so I'm glad all the other panelists went first because this question is something, I'm sorry, my nose, I'm just thinking up. This is something that I'm struggling with in the workplace. So like most of my career, I've been a contractor. I think my job now is my first full-time job. So for contractors, they really don't provide those opportunities. So it's been kind of hard. So I was really glad to hear what all of you were saying. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take that back, and I'm gonna start implementing that. But for the advocates part, like I said, when I was working at one of the companies when I was a contractor, I got bullied really bad, like real bad. I'd be crying. And my manager was my advocate, not only to remove the bully, but to also like build up my self-esteem because I was new and I'm like younger than most people on my team, even now. So like how to go about finding an advocate. Oh, man, this is hard, but I would say in the workplace, sometimes you will go to certain coworkers and you will tell them like what you're struggling with. And if they are very supportive of you and they're honest with their struggles, they are probably a good candidate to advocate for you because they relate to you. So that's something that has worked for me. Like sometimes I'll just talk to a coworker and be like, man, I'm really struggling with A, B, and C. Are you struggling? Or like, how have you navigate it. And they're like, oh, Chioma, I'm still struggling. I haven't figured it out. Or like, this is how I'm doing. And we kind of build that camaraderie. I'm saying it wrong, but we build that connection. And then if something does go down, in the workplace, we will, quote unquote, protect each other or advocate for each other. So that's what I would recommend on the advocate side.
So along those lines, I know my company actually has a formal peer mentoring program in that respect. And it's one of the best things I have ever done. I don't know if you've heard about, like, it's really hard to go from being a postdoc to a staff member. We got together, we helped each other write our resumes, helped each other talk about different places in the lab, because we all came from different parts. And we all got jobs within like a few months. Like, it was really successful. So one thing I will say is they don't have to be older than you. They don't have to have more experience than you. They really don't, to be a useful mentor and advocate, as you were saying. So, yeah, I second that.
Thank you so much for your answers. Those are some of like the really special, like first time I've heard this thing. So thank you so much. And I would like to now open the panel to any questions from the audience.
We do have some microphones here if people need them.
And we do have a QR code that if anybody would like to submit a questions anonymously, or anybody who's remote can, if you can scan this QR code and submit your questions, then I'll ask them.
I just want to know, for any non-STEM classes maybe you took, or a non-STEM class you wish you had taken, if you can comment on that. I know you commented on the glass blowing, but for everybody, a class you did take and maybe a class you wish you had taken.
So one of the reasons I went to CASE was I entered and I liked engineering, but I have always had a ton of other interests. And so I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to do engineering. And I ended up doing systems engineering, but I double majored in environmental studies. I also studied political science, computer science, and I loved my non-engineering classes. I took some really cool classes on environmental politics that helped me understand what was going on in the current issues. Like, we read the text of the Paris Climate Accord, and so when you see that headline of oh, Paris target not going to get hit, well, what are those targets? Why can't we hit them? So I really enjoyed my environmental and my political science coursework in the non-STEM realm. And one of the coolest classes I took was art history. So it's really funny because my mom, every semester she was like, you should take art history. I think you'd really enjoy it. Is this a semester that you're gonna take art history? And finally, my last semester at CASE, I was like, I have an extra spot, might as well. And it was so cool because and my mom might be watching on the live stream and being like, haha, I told you so. Because we are really well situated to take a class like that. Every other week, we go over to the Museum of Art, and we had a week's worth of lectures on Greek art. We're gonna go look at Greek art in the history in the art museum. We studied Egyptian art. Let's go look at Egyptian art. And I really loved that everything was so immediately applicable in that art history class. And every time I go to an art museum now, I know a little bit more than I did. So that for me was a really cool class, and I would highly recommend.
So I like to joke that I was ethnic dance and econ away from a political science major. And it actually has come in very much handy, not just because I took politics of Russia and work at a nuclear weapons lab. Those obviously matter. But also because I took things like healthcare in the United States, and that class taught me a ton about how things are funded in the US government. And as a project or program manager in a lab funded by the US government, it means a lot of the things that are happening around me that mystify many of the engineers that I'm giving money to, who they're confused why at the beginning of the year they're not allowed to buy anything because the government may shut down and the lab's trying to hoard money so that we don't have to go home unpaid. While it does, it's those sorts of things that taking those political science classes demystified that. So I am in a position where I can be like, guys, like, this is why. Calm down. Like, you'll get it eventually. But that's something that has been really useful in real terms, but also like the negotiations and things that you learn in those classes, how to speak to different people. I took a politics of natural resources and science class. Yeah. And it's really helpful to get your understanding and ability to communicate very technical things to other people so that they understand what you're saying. Because, I'm at the point where the people I talk to aren't just scientists. There are a lot of the people who are making decisions to give us money in, say, the armed services or in Washington, D.C. And so they really need to understand what we're asking for in order to be able to get that money. So, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys still have to take SAGES classes. You guys still do that? Okay. So a SAGES class that I took was the lies and beauty myths, or it was a similar class where they will talk about like beauty standards and the myths. And I'm gonna be honest, like that was, I think, the first class in my college career that was like, kind of exposed me to how the world works. Like some things that we don't even think about, like your hair color affects how people view you, how beautiful you are deemed, determines certain protections you get. And I was like, all of that just for beauty? Like, wow. So like being in that class, since it was SAGES, we would have discussions. So learning from people's experiences was really interesting because it was different from my experience. So honestly, it was a lot of fun. And because of that SAGES class, I'm going to be honest, ever since that SAGES class, I feel like I look at a lot of like social justice issues, the issues of beauty, and just seeing like how our world works. So I'm really glad that I took that class, even though it had nothing to do with my major, which was BME at the time, or biomedical engineering at the time. And then I took a Spanish minor because I really wanted to force myself to learn another language. And I picked Spanish because like I'm from Houston, Texas. There's a lot of Spanish speakers. So I'm like, I really want to learn a language because in America, when you only talk English, you think that's the only thing, right? And even though my parents do speak Igbo, which is a Nigerian language back home, I'm not able to speak that. So I'm like, no, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna make it a minor. So I'm forcing myself. And even though I really don't have a good grasp of the Spanish language, because languages are hard for me to learn, I do not regret that class because I can read a little bit in Spanish. Sometimes when I run into Spanish speakers and they don't know any English, I can speak just enough Spanish to get someone who can speak Spanish to help. And I feel like that has made me more compassionate for people who may not speak the same language as you. So when people say, oh, my English is not good or I'm struggling, I'm like, you don't even have to tell me twice. Like I was dying in Spanish class and it was like Spanish 101. I'm like, you don't even have to apologize because navigating these systems, I feel like that gave me a lot more compassion. As for classes, I wish I would have taken more. I believe it's sociology, that's like the study of people, right? Yeah, I wish I took some more sociology classes, like the study of people, how civilizations come. So like now what I do in my free time, I'm looking at like marriage trends and how that's tied to fertility rates and changing expected roles of men and women and how that connects. And that's like really interesting to me because it does inform a lot of policies, informs a lot of things of like what we may think. And I'm like, I really wish I took more classes on that.
So I'll second the SAGES classes as well. So one of my first SAGES classes was a visiting professor who was a healthcare journalist. And so just hearing her perspective was interesting. And then that's who I ended up working with to set up the healthcare symposium, which was for beyond MDs and RNs. So what do you do and what can you do in the healthcare field that isn't related to being a doctor or a nurse? So that experience was very, very interesting. So we found different speakers, bioethicists, health disability lawyers, individuals that were in charge of marketing for the Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, and had them brought them in to speak to the students about, what other paths they could take without, with their biology degree outside of being just being a physician or being a nurse. And that experience was just eye-opening to me, and it was just a really neat thing to be able to do and be exposed to. As for what classes I wish I would have had time for, unfortunately, was the fine arts. So that's something that I was really passionate about in high school. I loved painting, I loved drawing. And then with the Cleveland Institute of Art right here, I wish I would have had more time to do that. But all the studio classes conflicted with my labs, so I wasn't able to do that. But that is something that I wish I would have had time to pursue in my time here at Case.
Yeah, I also really loved Sages. I know, I think they're phasing it out now, but it took me out of my comfort zone to take classes that I wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. I just like learning things, and so there's an infinite number of classes I wish I could have taken because I just like taking classes. I like learning a little bit in this area and a little bit in that area. But I had forgotten about my Sages. I took a class on racial issues and mass incarceration in the U.S. and I'm not sure I've ever learned more in a class. We partnered with a group of men who were in prison, and so we actually went and had conversations with them both over the phone and in person. And I just hadn't been exposed to those issues before, unfortunately, and it really opened my eyes. And I'm not sure if not for Sages, I would have ever taken that class. So that's why I was a little bummed to hear that they're getting rid of Sages, because it made me take things that I wouldn't have otherwise.
This is one of the questions that dates me because I was pre-Sages.
Thank you for your answer. Yeah, Sages is the newest class are no longer taking Sages. They have a new system now, and I hope that system, because I don't know what it's gonna turn into, but I hope that it will develop into something that is like Sages, because I have had Sages class that I really like as well. And we are running low on time, so if there are any more questions, I think, I don't know if the panelists are staying a little bit after.
Sure.
Thank you so much. So you can ask or is there one that you have right now?
Go for it.
Sorry if I'm about to make you stay super late.
No, it's fine.
Question about negotiating in interviews. Do you feel like it's hurtful or helpful to bring up gender culture in an interview, and how do you determine that? Do you look at the gender of the person interviewing you, or maybe their age? How do you navigate that when you're trying to look for a job? Because that's something you want to know, right, going in, but how do you ask?
So I would say one of the most awkward things about my first interview was I had just gotten married when I interviewed for my postdoc. And so I walked in the room, and the guy who was introducing me went, "This is Catherine Gabbett Hoffmeister. What's your name? She just got married," to the whole room. And one of the managers stood up and said, "You cannot say that. Let's start this over." And I think that was one of the ways I knew that this was the place I wanted to work. But I think I don't necessarily bring it up in an interview so much as a lot of times if you have a group interview and then you have one-on-one discussions with people, especially I know I had a couple one-on-one discussions with women that were working in the lab where those things came up. And I think it's helpful to know if you are going to be a good fit for where you're going. but I don't know if the answer is no, if they would tell you. Depends on the person. But I don't know, what have your guys' experiences been?
For me, it's been utilizing LinkedIn. And then as you know, more upperclassmen, right, that have graduated and gone on, looking to see if you have any second or, first or second degree connections associated with that company or that institution that you're looking to go to, because it's helpful to have conversations with individuals that work in that company that aren't on your interview panel, because they're going to be a little bit more forthcoming with information to you. So that I've been able to find out a lot of good information that way by asking, having those conversations and doing my research up front before interviewing at companies. You can ask a lot more candid questions that way than in the interview.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand your question, you're saying if it's okay or if it harms us to bring up I'm sorry, can you ask your question again?
Totally. Is it helpful or harmful to bring up gender culture at all? If you do, how do you navigate it? And if not, are there ways you can covertly find out answers? Like what answers? Because obviously a recruiter is not going to tell you, oh yeah, we hate women.
Of course.
They're going to do that. But like what answers covertly mean, no, we're not going to treat you worse because you're a woman. What do you know the code? Is there a code?
That's a good question. If you guys have any answer to that.
You can. So another thing, going back to LinkedIn, you can look at the company and look at the makeup of the individuals that are tied to that organization, if they look like you or if they don't, right? So the people that you want, is there someone that looks like you in the role that you'd like, or is it not? So that's one of the ways you can kind of covertly tease out that, even if you don't know anyone that works in that specific place.
I just thought of an actual answer. You can ask about employee resource groups. If it's a large company, they may have like a women's group or a LGBTQ group or a Hispanic group. And you can ask for the names of the people who are on it, because as interviewers, they should know the name of someone, or HR should know the name of someone that would be willing to talk to you about it. So if you are concerned in some of those respects, that's a good resource. And again, as Ashley said, they're not on your interview panel.
Yeah, I think, a big like green flag to look for is women who are on the leadership team, because that also means that, you will be supported to become a leader if the leadership team already has women. That doesn't mean like if there aren't women in the C-suite that they won't support you, but I think that that's a big like green flag to look for, in addition to who interviewed you, and like, do you feel like a connection, and did you feel like supported in that? Interviews obviously like they're very formal, but I think like trust your gut, and if the interview gave you a good feeling and the people that you talked to gave you a good feeling, like trust that feeling. If it didn't give you a good feeling, trust that feeling too, because it's better to, to make sure that it's the right fit for you and that it's somewhere that you'd be supported.
So I would answer to how you can covertly find out. So I'm still trying to figure this out. But if you go on their website, if they say anything about diversity and inclusion, bring it up in your interview. Be like, hey, I'm so interested in your company. I saw on your website that you're interested in diversity and inclusion, and that's one of your core values. Can you tell me more about that? And then depending on the recruiter, they may be very good at going around it. Some very honest recruiters may just be straight up and be like, look, like I've actually had some recruiters do that. Like they were very honest with me. So I know a lot of companies, they put something on their website about diversity and inclusion. So ask that question and you'll be like, I read on your website and I'm so interested in this part. Can you tell me more? And see what they say. And I feel like I'm still learning what the code words are, but if they're like, if they say, oh, we've increased our diversity numbers, and they don't give you specifics on like the gender breakdown or the racial breakdowns, they're probably scared to give it to you because then they might know. They're like, yeah, we include our diversity, but not our diversity of people who look like you. You know, and I like, as a Black woman, I've had that. I'm like, you've hired more women, but where the Black women at? I thought so. I say this in my mind. I don't say it out loud. So I feel like in the interview, just bring up the diversity and inclusion since it's on their site and see what they say. And then as for a code word, so I really don't have a good answer. For that, sometimes you will find out when you're in the company. So when you join the team, if there's anyone that looks like you that you're comfortable talking to, you know, sneakily send them a message, be like, how do you like the company? How is like everyone treating you? Who can you go to for help? And then something that I do, especially being a Black woman, I pay attention to how my Black colleagues are being treated, even if I don't know them. So that's something. So I'm like, oh, this Black colleague got in trouble for this little mistake, but this white colleague didn't. Taking that note down. Oh, this woman did this, the man did the same thing, but the woman got chewed out. Bet. I got that down. So sometimes you may have to observe after the fact.
But I do think, like, you know, if you ask the question, you know, and they give you, you know, if they're uncomfortable asking the question, that's probably not a great sign about their, you know, the company's views on diversity. Like, right, part of the interview is obviously like they want to pick you, but you want to pick them as well. And I personally like don't believe in leaving questions unasked. I think because maybe it's not the right company for you, and like that's totally fine. If they're not going to answer a question about, you know, diversity, about being a woman, about being a minority in the way that makes you feel seen and you feel represented, you know, that doesn't necessarily bode well for what your experience there would be as well. So I think, yeah, do look out for those things. And I think it's worth asking the question, and like a recruiter, that's like their job is to answer hard questions, you know. They've probably been asked harder questions than what you're going to ask. So I wouldn't feel afraid to do so if you have any lingering questions about whether they would support you being your authentic self.
Sometimes though, the challenge with the recruiters, depending on the size of the company, is that they're outsourced, or they might be a group that's there. They might not be physically at the location that you would be working. So that's where some of these questions you might want to find out, you know, who would be your team members, who you'd be working with, to get more of that, you know, boots on the ground type view. Because, like, at least, you know, the larger companies that I've worked at, the recruiters sit outside. They're not directly, you know, working with that team on a day-to-day basis. So some of those finer details about what do those day-to-day interactions look like, they're not going to know. So if you can, you know, have your would-be boss connect you with someone else, again, on his or her team, to say, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what that company culture is like. Is there someone else that I can talk to in your group? You can ask that. Even after, actually, at the aerospace defense company, one of the reasons I actually went there was an engineering managers reached out to me after the fact and said, well, hey, you know, we have this other person on our team that was a biomedical engineer, and she moved into aerospace. So I want to connect you too, so you can ask her questions. So that was a neat thing for me to see that, oh, he went above and beyond after the interview to connect me with someone that I could, you know, speak to and get a few more questions answered outside of the formal interview.
That's really cool that they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if they give a terrible answer during the interview and then follow up with something like better, trust the thing they follow up with.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, you can get flustered by questions in interviews, so can your interviewers. Yeah.
One question that is fun to ask in interviews too is asking about, you know, if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing in the company, what would you choose? And throwing it back on them about what are the things that you would like to see changed about this organization.
Yeah. A question I like a lot too is like, why do you stay at this company? Like, sure, like it might be different, like what caused them to join versus like why they stayed. And that's a question I like a lot because it shows, that, that there's like a reason to stay and that like they care a lot about the company. So I like that question too, especially for someone who's been in a company for a while.
But that is another good thing to tease, or to, tease out information is how long, what's the tenure of the individuals on that team, right? If everybody's, new within the first year or two and it's a team that's existed for, decades, that might be a red flag.
Yeah. I would. Oh, I think Kelly's saying it's time to be done.
Oh, yes.
I was going to say, one thing to know at big companies is you can have vastly different experiences in departments that are side by side. And that's something you may come across is, just because this department might not be a good fit, the one next door could be. So.
Yeah, thank you for your answer and thank you for the awesome questions that we have gotten. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so thank you so much to the panelists for being here. It's been a wonderful experience hearing your insights. And thank you to the Case Alumni Association, especially Ms. Kelly Hendricks, for helping us put together this panel. And thank you, everybody, for attending our panel, and have a great weekend.